Greetings, folks. Another episode of Maroon Getaway, Life Examined by Inspiring 21st Century Maroon. So it's just appreciating the economic implications of all of this, understanding that the purpose of the reliance on the functional import of maintaining this system. Although in reading some accounts, some historical accounts of certain important figures in American history, they're having some kind of disquietude in having this system be prolonged as long as it did. The money was talking to them. I mean, when you even in seeing what happened over in Britain. So I've been been living in the UK for several years. I think what's interesting to see what happened here. Eventually the British had outlawed slavery in the early 19th century. So somewhere between 1804 and 1807, and then eventually in the 1830s, the British ended up actually paying reparations to British slave owners as the way in which they would agree to ending slavery. So there was this understanding that property was sacred to the British. Even for those who wanted to have slavery end, meaning the abolitionists, people like William Wilberforce and all these folks that are celebrated, the only way for it to end sort of formally as an institution would be if the people who were profiting from it would be repaid for what they were going to lose from its being abolished. So you can see this there's a British historian named David Olusoga who talks about this. There's a great BBC documentary where he goes through this history. British slave owners were paid the equivalent of 40% of the entire what was contained in the entire British treasury in the year 1834, which was, in those days, it was 20 million British pounds, which in our time would be equal to roughly 30 billion US dollars, or about 17 billion British pounds. And again, the people who were enslaved received nothing, because what you can only conclude is that the reason why they received nothing is because they were not people. So again, how do you reconcile that in your mind? Cosmology. You have to create some kind of cosmological ordering which allows for you to be able to do those kinds of things, to where what it is that you're doing ultimately is not of really much consequence, because you're not dealing with people, right? That's the way you reconcile it. That's the way they reconcile it, basically. Okay. Back to the piece. So he continues here, but racism continues and does to this day, not just in the American South, but throughout the nation and internationally as well. For the white upper classes, it ensures the solidarity of much of the white working class with elites, rather than the people of color of similar economic status. And this is one of the really pernicious elements or aspects of racism, is that because you've made people who don't look like you into non-humans, and the reason why you've made them into non-humans is because they don't look like you, which is a very strange kind of it's a really weird narcissism, that somehow, unless someone looks like you, unless they reflect you, they can't be human. It's very weird, even though you're both in the same boat, right? You're both in the same situation, and the same people who that have exploited them are also exploiting you. But somehow you are convinced that the people who are exploiting you are the same as you because they resemble you. So it's a very strange kind of sort of Jedi mind tricks type of arrangement. It's very, very odd. So meanwhile, the poor of all ethnicities, including poor European Americans, remain subject to a predatory economic system. From the prey's point of view, predation looks and feels like persistent poverty, lack of opportunity, cultural oppression, and much higher rates of incarceration and police violence. The lower class person is encouraged to think, if I'm not getting ahead, it's my fault, or it's the fault of other groups who are competing unfairly for scarce resources. Right. So again, this is another one of those ways of being able to take advantage of people psychologically. Is again, the situation is said to be the fault not of the exploiter, not of the one who is sort of created this system which allows for them to exploit or predate on other groups of people, you make it the fault of the exploited, right? That's a cosmological thing, right? You have to construct the world in a manner that allows for you to be able to reconcile or justify doing these things to people. From the elite's point of view, predation looks quite different. The upper classes are encouraged to think we deserve all that we have because we are superior. We're smarter, we work harder, and we are the result of good breeding. The prey, in contrast, are often conceived of by elites as unintelligent, lazy, and lacking in breeding. They are to be managed like cattle or sheep for their own good via low-wage jobs, drugs, debt, and prisons. Often elites turn reality on its head, painting the poor as parasites, which is, again, a very, it's a really neat trick. The people who are siphoning off of or living off of the labor of other people, that the people who are doing the work that are being extracted are the parasites. Again, it's a very neat bit of psychological warfare, if you will. Right. Often elites turn reality on its head, painting the poor as parasites and themselves as the producers of all that is worthy in society. The ideology of the elites is inculcated in each new generation in exclusive schools and reinforced through high-class, quote-unquote, amusements, including memberships in country clubs and symbols of achievement. The upper and lower classes alike tend to share the view that it is better to be a predator.